I just wanted to take a sec to show you this Tron scene and how I put the render together, because I knew that at full render it was going to be a ridiculous amount of time to uh, basically get each frame. So I don't even want to think about the amount of time per frame it was going to take. So what I did instead was I split everything up. And in this case, we'll start with the plane here. So I rendered everything with an alpha background. You go here. Where is it here? Have this set to transparent. So for the terrain portion, which I'll show you later, the camera doesn't go outside of enough to of the terrain itself to I can so when the camera's looking at the terrain, it doesn't go outside of it during this animation enough to worry about the transparency overall. So really that's reserved for the light jet and the fog volumes that I have in the scenes, which I have named clouds because they are. Essentially, the first scene that you get to view is only the first cloud layer. There are actually two, but I was not willing to wait that long in order to get to. I mean, the scene looks all right with the first 155 frames. I just didn't feel the need to go any further than that. It's actually 1,000 frames long, so keep that in mind. So we have the plane, the light jet, which is on its own transparency layer. Should be in cycles. So when it renders, we should only see the light jet. And I also kept the render settings low, which is extremely important for low-end PC users. Um, as you can see for the viewport, I have it set for 5, so it's all right. And then the max is 10. And what I'm doing is rendering it without denoise. So I'm denoising on the viewport end, but not on the render end. And then when I go back through the frames, I bring them into the compositor and denoise them there, export that as a video, and then combine all of this stuff later. So that's basically the whole process. But like I said, you can see the jet here, and same thing for the landscape. It take a sec to load. What do you mean rendering that? Oh, right. So another thing that I had to do was I learned this from another tutorial, but you set your whatever it is that's on scene that you don't want to capture light when you're trying to do fog, you just set it to emission and keep it at 0 so that basically no light can affect it. And then you're allowed to render your fog easily because essentially everything's black. And then you bring it in with a screen blend in the call it the sequencer. Yeah, you bring it in with a blend through the sequencer. So we'll look at this later. I'm trying to figure out why my terrain black. Oh, because I didn't apply the material color to AM. All right. So yeah, we have our terrain here, which rendered on its own 150 frame, and it's just the camera following an empty, nothing major here. And then lastly, we have our cloud volumes. I have 3, one for the surface. Well, we'll just turn off the second one because we won't even get that high based on the animation time, but it's literally just, I don't even know if you'll be able to see it. View. But if we take a look here, pull up my landscape, get a perspective. Okay. So as you can see, the fog volume kind of cascading over the terrain. Splits right here because the camera doesn't look at from these angles, so I wasn't too worried about it. It's following it from a vertical. So I'm leaving this transparent for now, though the background could easily be turned back on. I just, for the purposes of speeding up the render, I just felt it was more relevant or it was more efficient to just render the background transparent since we're just looking from this angle on. So I really like the way this looks. Another reason why I keep the viewport shader samples low is because it gives it more of a watercolor painted effect, which seems to get the aesthetic of like a concept art. So I think that helps with the scene. As you can see, if there were more terrain to fill in this fog, then it wouldn't be as bright. Same goes for this. It's very reactive to what it's surrounded by as well. So if there's nothing reflecting the light around it, then it's just going to turn white. As you can see, these are the two volumes. Like I said, there are three. And now let's take a look at this. So as I said, I kept this one the same, and these two have a screen added. So without them, plane disappears, fog disappears. So that's pretty cool. I would highly recommend this way of rendering if you're trying to do something big. And keep in mind, this isn't a very high poly mesh. The terrain isn't high poly. Well, actually, I take that back. The terrain is very high poly just for the shape. It doesn't actually have to be, but that's probably what is eating up most of my render time because it's not a simple shape. So I probably would have gotten better results or faster results, I should say, if I had used a remesh or what's the word, a decimate to unsubdivide this a little bit or something like that. So just keep that kind of stuff in mind when you're planning your renders out, and maybe it's best to split things up and that also gives you the opportunity to work on certain parts. Maybe you want this to look a little bit more sharp or something like that, so you can kind of go in and make finer details, and it's not all tied to the same frame. And just because Blender layers doesn't exist in its current form, that doesn't mean that you can't split it up in your own way and just figure it out. So I hope you found this helpful, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next one.